distinguished panel to come up and join us. Well, I welcome everybody to, as I said, the second simulcast Cybersecurity Awareness Month launch. Thank you so much to Lockheed Martin for once again hosting us here at the Global Vision Center. While we are a small group here today, we are a dedicated one. And you'll also be happy to know that the GVC will be broadcast into people's offices and living rooms from the TechAmerica website and our own Facebook posts and Twitter feeds. Chris Knox, one of our interns this year, is tweeting and capturing on video our event today, so it won't be static. It'll be part of our archives. Thank you in advance to the panel for joining us today and coming to offer your thoughts and perspectives. But really, we have very knowledgeable people here in the room too, so I don't want anyone to feel like I want this to be as interactive as possible. I'd like to start out by saying congratulations to all of us for accomplishing cyber awareness job number 1. Raising the level of awareness of our senior policy leaders and business leaders about cybersecurity. There was a day when there was no dhs.gov/stopthinkinet, believe it or not. And there was also a day when there was no White House cybersecurity office. So congratulations to us and our colleagues in this room and in the community for achieving that. So now that we have their attention, what can we do to leverage it for greater cybersecurity awareness throughout society through partnership? And that's an overarching question that I'll sort of throw out there for hopefully a discussion on how the market is addressing cybersecurity awareness and how policymakers can address cybersecurity awareness. So let me just briefly introduce the panel today. Most of you know everybody, but they are quite expert, and many have been at the dhs.gov that didn't have stopthinkinet and backslash them. So they are well experienced. Just in alphabetical order, Cheri McGuire is here, Vice President of Global Government Affairs and Cybersecurity Policy for Symantec. Sachs, Vice President for Government Affairs and Cybersecurity Policy from Verizon. Titus, Vice President and Chief Information Security Officer for Unisys, and Andrew Liesyl, Chief Security Officer for Qualys. I'm leaving out the very long and distinguished bios, so I hope they will forgive me, but it will be readily available for you on our website. Cheri, do you want to go ahead?
Sure. Thanks, Liesyl. A special thanks to TechAmerica as well as Lockheed Martin. Cheri, thank you very much for hosting today. We really appreciate it. Appreciate the opportunity to speak to you about the current state of cybersecurity. At Symantec, because we're a security company, every day is cybersecurity awareness day, right? So for us, we're always delighted when October rolls around and there's sort of national and global attention focused on cybersecurity awareness. But really, as the Secretary and others that spoke this morning said in remarks from Michigan, cybersecurity awareness shouldn't just be 1 month a year. It should be something we think about all the time. But I want to talk just a couple minutes to set the stage for the threat landscape and the evolution that we're seeing from a security standpoint in our company. And I don't have to talk to you all about the evolution from script kiddies to critical infrastructure attacks that we're seeing with the types of attacks such as Stuxnet and hacktivists and nation states. And I think everybody here is probably well aware of that. But we are seeing the sophistication and the numbers of attacks growing exponentially. In our Symantec Internet Security Threat Report that came out in April of this year, we identified 286 million unique variants of malware in 2010 alone. 286 million. And when you look at that in comparison to 2002, we identified 20,000. I mean, that's just growth that you can't even hardly wrap your mind around. And we also recently released, a few weeks ago, our 2011 Norton Cybercrime Report. And for the first time, we tried to quantify economic impacts that have to be just as organized if we're going to thwart these attackers. But in this report, we interviewed 20,000 people in 24 countries, and we saw that we estimated that the cost of global cybercrime, this is just cybercrime, we're not even talking about enterprise, this is against individuals, at $114 billion a year. And the value of lost time due to recovery and impact for those individuals, we estimated to be $274 billion. And again, numbers that are really hard to wrap your mind around. We also estimated that 431 million have been victims globally of cybercrime, and 54% of those individuals, those 20,000 individuals that were surveyed, said that they had been personally victims of viruses and malware, and 11% indicated they had been victims of online scams, and 10% indicated they had been victims of phishing attacks. And we know that those online scams and phishing attacks and spear phishing are just continuing to rise as those targeted attacks are the new way the cyber criminals are going after things. So I'll stop there. Hopefully I've set the stage a little bit about the level of the criminal engagement and the severity with which, from an economic standpoint and criminal activity perspective, that we're all facing the challenge that we have in not only addressing cybercrime and attacks, but addressing, more importantly, raising awareness so that everyone can protect themselves better than ever.
Oh, thank you, Cheri. Those exponential numbers are just mind-boggling, really, when you think about it. On the one hand, on the positive side, more and more people are online globally. So I guess that presents an opportunity for awareness. Thank you. Marcus.
Thank you, Liesyl.
Mind to go next?
And thanks, Charlie, and to the gang for being here, for hosting us. And for anybody who's watching this tape or live, this, like anything else on the internet, will always live forever. So we have to be careful what we say, because sometimes it is predictive. People will refer back and say, yeah, but you said. As many of you know, Verizon has many places in the system of systems that makes up the global networks. For most people across the country, this is how we are known, as all these little wireless devices. Here in Washington, a little different because we're the incumbent phone company, so we have valves everywhere, and others see us as service providers. And so it's an interesting role because all the evil that's out there passes through our networks, so we are the conduits of the evil. And that puts us in a really interesting position as to how much of this are we supposed to block versus how much of this should we pass through. Many would like the networking companies to just be nothing but dumb pipes. Your job is to move a bit from Alice to Bob, and your job is not to make any determination about the meaning of that bit. There are others who say, no, your job is to be filtering and blocking and shaping, so we have this kind of dichotomy there of opinions as to what's the role of a network service provider. That being said, we have customers to worry about, we have our own networks to worry about, we've got our own internal processes, and we love the month of October because, much like others, this is an opportunity for us to focus. And so last year we did a little bit, this year we're doing a lot more inside the company in terms of employee awareness, using this month as an opportunity to remind our own employees of the importance of cybersecurity of themselves, and not just our networks, not just our customers, but how they do it. So since you're talking about reports, Cheri, your report also discusses the human factor. I was 95-ish%, what the exact number was, that people being part of the chain of the intrusions. It's not just that you've got criminals and terrorists and spies that are causing it, but to actually gain access to systems, there's a person in that chain at some point in most cases, because they're not members of the investigate. We've had the same findings in our Verizon investigations, Andy and their investigations in the APT, and this is repetitive over and over and over. We're seeing that it's no longer a technical attack, it's really more of a mind or social type of attack is what's gaining access. Why is that? Well, if you go back about 10, 12 years, back to the world of Windows 98, Windows ME, Windows NT, things like that, the technical systems were actually fairly easy to get into. To Microsoft's credit, to Apple's credit, to Linux, others that are working in the operating system and software world, they've really raised the bar. This It's very hard now to break into Windows 7. It's very hard to break into iPod, iPad operating systems, Macintosh, other types of platforms. But the criminals are still there. They're still interested. They still want to get in. So it's hard to get into the hardware, software world. Go after what was talked about earlier was the lead range, people. And this is why awareness is so important now, is because the criminal mindset, those who are attacking us, have recognized that there's a lot of strength in the network, there's a lot of strength in the hardware, a lot of strength in the software. The weakness now is in the human layer. And you have to protect the brain. In other words, the operating system that sits between our ears. And that's where we need to start focusing. We don't forget about where we come from. We still need to keep working on the hardware software side. But we have to remember that the human mind is an operating system also. And it's very easy to fool, very easy to manipulate. And that's the importance of this type of awareness and the things we have to do year round, not just on cases.
Thank you, Marcus. Patty, do you want to do anything else?
Sure. I had a chance to travel a lot. As a matter of fact, I ran into Charlie as we were passing through customs, both coming back from Brussels at the same time. Unusual, but the opportunity that I get to get out of the United States as well as to travel within the U.S. gives me a pretty broad view of what's taking place, not just within our boundaries of the 50 states, but what also is happening across the globe. We're seeing this proliferation of consumer technologies proliferating themselves into our infrastructure and wanting to attach themselves to our enterprises. And we thank Verizon for the great work they've done in providing those tools to us. And what we're seeing is that the threat is actually expanding. So many more people are now connected because of wireless capabilities and technologies that it's actually driving the marketplace to a completely different set of priorities. So we're really starting to see this swing away from network-centric security, which we all still need, but we're also seeing this focus at the data-centric level. So it's really giving NIST a great opportunity to push forward data categorization and starting to really focus on what is the important data we need to protect. If it's citizens protecting their private identities, if it's a company protecting the crown jewels of the corporation, and starting to really focus the dollars on that information instead of it just being across the board. So we've really had quite a different swing and a paradigm shift of the old lockdown model and the lockdown framework, and we're now really starting to look at what are better ways to protect data. So as we move forward, we're looking forward to the advancements and innovations of companies such as Symantec, as well as the innovations and transparency that we're hoping our providers will integrate into the technologies, such as Verizon, and also looking at what we can do to get better visibility into the data. And I look toward the very end of the table at my friend Andrew, who also has part of this solution. So as a company inside the corporation, I'm always looking at better ways to control data and protect information. We've been on a huge swing this entire, I would say since July, we've been on a huge swing of education inside the company to the point that I actually traveled to India to spend a couple of weeks teaching our employees about what's really happening. Because I also think it's not only important to train people about the tools they're using, but it's also important to educate them on what the threat is. Because if they understand the threat, if they understand that the cyber mafia now is just one person sitting in a room somewhere, it's no longer the guys with the submachine guns running into a bank. If they can understand that threat and understand that they're the target and that they have a responsibility, we think that that's a greater opportunity to protect our environment. I can't be the cyber cop of the entire Unisys 23,000 employees. I need everybody's help to make that happen. So we've really been on a swing here to educate our employees, which this month, this shared responsibility is information that you can give to your employees that they can take home. So that's another way that we're targeting our employees, and we're looking forward to the innovations coming as we start to move into more smart technology, smartphones and tablet PCs.
Thank you, Patty. I'm glad to hear you went back to India. That's the first meet our counterparts, but anyway, here's to the next one, the next trip. And
Thank you very much. I'm very happy to be here. I'm very happy to be here with such esteemed colleagues on the stand up here. And this is an exciting time. There's no doubt that having a whole month focused on cybersecurity, that's just the kind of thing that gets people like me excited to be able to talk and share and get it out to the people that we work with, that we, our family and our friends, and really get this message out. As a security officer for a security company that provides on-demand security services, I've got two hats. So I've got to worry about the security of my own company, and I also have to worry about the security of the services that are provided. So it's very challenging. But the thing that Marcus mentioned was the one thing that really hit to me is that while there are technology challenges, we're really talking about the human element. I mean, my company did a study about the state of SSL and the internet, and it was shocking to find how many websites out there are still running SSL 2.0, which is known to be vulnerable, and for years. But this is still going on. So the challenge of awareness is very large, but events like this, the South Inc. Connect, certainly will help.
great, thank you very much. Well, I think that we certainly have a illustrative picture of what the threat is that's out there, what companies like yours are doing, not only to protect your own environment, which, I think reputational risk is real in this environment, but also to protect your end users, whoever they may be, your employees, your customers, whether they be enterprises or individuals. So I think that helps provide a framework for some discussion, which I hope we'll get into in a moment. The theme, one of the themes that I think our counterparts in Michigan are discussing, sort of moving forward in the future, cybersecurity awareness. And, I think Patty touched on exactly that with regard to the new technologies that are out there. Marcus touched on it with how the brain is working. And as I watch, I have to channel Howard for a moment here because I do have my own little petri dish at home. I have 2 3.5-year-old boys, and it's incredible the instinctual nature they have. And Franz and I don't have 2 netbooks, but they do play on the one laptop. It's really incredible, and I'm just wondering how old will they be, or should they already have their first password? They're 3.5. So as a mom, I have increasing challenges. But where does that education start, and how do we get that going? Anybody, really, anybody in the room.
All right, I'll start, and then you guys can finish. Since you're a mom, you'll know where I'm coming from as a dad.
And I should know.
My kids are a little older, they're in their mid-20s, and so we went through this challenge as teenagers. They came of age in the 90s when the internet was coming of age. And one of the things we learned early on was that the internet and the internet experience is extremely public, and that kids like to be public, but in the home they think they're private. When you raise teenagers, and soon you talked about the phenomenon of wanting to close the bedroom door and have their privacy, and not having parents intruding and stuff. One of the things we did early on, though, was to make sure that their own computers, as well as ours, were always in public places. In other words, it was a household with no computers in the bedroom. It had to be in the den, family room, the basement, or someplace where it's publicly available. And in fact, even burning into them that as I'm working on something that you might think is private, like family taxes or something, they are welcome to sit and watch. In other words, you're, as a parent, you're putting up the approach to the kids that what I do is public, what you do is public, assume no privacy. If that kind of is burned in, then they don't get this mindset that we see with many kids where they have this relationship between them and their virtual fantasy world of privacy that doesn't exist. And they think that they're channeling privacy, but the whole world is watching. And so that's a parenting 101. We can write books and books and books about this, but your challenge as your children grow up is they'll want to be inquisitive, but they will eventually start challenging your authority as a parent. And so if you're doing online, oh yeah, well, it can get worse. If you're doing online, what you want them to do, they see you do it. It's a whole lot easier when they're younger than when they're 18 or 19, and now you're trying to challenge start young, is the answer to the question.
Okay, gotcha. But my,
Back to that.
Just quickly, my question though is what happens when that computer becomes a cell phone in the pocket and walks out the door with it?
Same question, you train them. What do you do with your cell phone?
And I think that is part of the challenge, right? Because they have different generations here. We're talking about what I've heard referred to as the digital natives, the people that have grown up with the internet and technology their whole life and cannot comprehend a time when you couldn't be always connected. And, well, let's face it, the rest of us here who have a different concept of privacy and what do I share and what do I not share. So it's very difficult, I think, or challenging for people, especially folks who are not in the information security community, to be able to impart that instruction to their children because they don't understand it as well. So we as a community need to try to provide tools to all of society as to the rules of the game, the manners, the norms of this new online society, people.
There was a question in the back that I looked up.
Well, actually, that comment, which is, my sense is that we need to broaden the discussion, that we need to take a very wide and deep approach to the problem. We all tend to sort of go tactical in the things that we should do, like day-to-day, and that's important as well. But I think the commitment here needs to be one about always and hi, by the way, nice to see you, Liesyl. And I'm Darren Anderson from Norman Data Defense Systems. That it needs to be a half the distance to the wall discussion. That at the end of the day, everything's important as it relates to this. Protection of our kids, protection of our critical infrastructure, all of it's important so that we need to make sure that we're actually fighting down the path of all those fronts. And sometimes we hone in on the very specific things and don't look at the bigger picture, which is at the end of the day, everything needs to be addressed. So I'd suggest the zoom out approach is say, what are all the things we need to be doing? And for me, that ends up being very much a grassroots approach to things where from within a community, a metro community, a business community, a school community, people are starting to drive down the paths on each of these important aspects. Because we each have a business life, we have a private life, we have kids, we have other ways that we interact. So it's sort of the everything argument at the end of the day.
So I think that's a great step into this notion that many people, when they go into their work environment, they have their passwords, they've got their mandatory cybersecurity training, they've got programs like you have here at Lockheed around stop connect, cybersecurity management. But then they go home and they don't apply those same things that they've learned in their work environment on their home environment. So how do we kind of bridge that gap? I think that's a real, that's an area that is huge green space for many companies and the government and other organizations like the National Cybersecurity Alliance to continue to try to bridge that gap because it's really interesting to, when I talked to my mom about this and only recently, I've been in this space for over 10 years, and only recently that she said, I'm getting these pop-ups that say my security software needs to be reviewed. I said, you need to pay attention to that. And maybe I need to come down and do that for you. But again, it's trying to bridge that gap between the home user, recognizing that everyone in the work environment is also a home user. And they need to think about, in particular, this whole concept, and Patty, you mentioned it, consumerization of IT. As many of us are beginning to bring our own mobile devices into our enterprise networks, and that's a huge challenge on its own for corporate America and large enterprises today, is how do you go about securing all of these personal devices, such as iPads and smartphones, and not to mention cloud computing. But huge challenge there, but how are we going about securing those devices? And moving away from this device-centric model, which all of us have subscribed to in the past, to an information or a data-centric model of security in the future. So what boundaries are we putting around the information to secure the information as opposed to just, what's the latest security software, which you need, don't get me wrong, everyone needs that, but that's not your only labor of defense.
Yeah, so let me go back to your 3.5-year-old boys, because I already. He's far better at making the coconut and the monkey thing work than his grandmother. But I think what's important is that not only that we're looking at how we're educating them on the use of devices and technology and when to have a password, but that we as parents and adults, and not just for ourselves, but for our children, there's a tremendous amount of identity theft happening with children that have social security numbers that we get for them when they're born. And there was a big Dateline, yes, great, thank you. One of those on these young children whose identities are being stolen and their social security numbers are being used for mortgages and to open credit cards. So I think this data component, and it's not just for us, our senior citizens are suffering from this. We're in the thick of IT, and so we feel like we might have a better grasp of it than perhaps our family members. So I've got my family members have demanded that I now, whatever training I'm doing and to in the company, they said, well, why don't we get it? I mean, you're the expert, why aren't you? So I'll be home in a couple of weeks, and so we're having the big family meeting so that I can do the same online safety for them. But when I look at my grandson and the technology which is enabling him to communicate and have an encyclopedia of data at his fingertips, it's also exposing that identity where it's almost, it is actually so much more important to monitor what's happening to them and Google them or search engine them to look to see if their name pops up somewhere. So there's a lot of great technology that we can use to help protect ourselves. It's educating people that those tools are out there and they're available for them to use to aid in this whole cybersecurity benefit, but it's also created a dilemma. So pros and cons, the good, the bad, and the ugly, unfortunately.
Thank you, Patty. I think thinking about the tools that we have, not only either policy-making tools or parenting tools, but also product tools. You know, what is the market demanding? What are people demanding? I mean, are they demanding more? Do we see a change in the way companies are protecting themselves and protecting their data and protecting their end users? Do we see more of that?
I'll take credit for that. I think the answer to that is yes. I think awareness is up. I think certainly technology plays a role, and there is a place for these new tools, new technologies to secure people's information in their workstations, but the awareness is really key. And I think it's my perception that what users are really demanding is the simplicity. And we heard earlier that complexity is the enemy of security. Well, it's very true. I mean, users expect that if you give me a computer that it's going to update itself. It's going to take care of that. If you have a security setting on an operating system and it's not enabled by default, that's wrong. And those things are changing, I think. I think the industry is getting better at that. But I think the tools need to be more intuitive. They need to react more to the fact that the user is just, it's a user. Someone using the device. They don't want to be an expert in the device. They don't want to be a technology person. They want to use the device, the cell phone, the iPad, the iPhone, the computer, to do what their task is, to communicate, to pay bills, and they don't really want to have to worry about, do I have TLS 1.0 enabled? If we're requiring users to do that, we fail.
I would just say that one of the parts of awareness that also has to be, just like you tune up your car, you service your car, is doing similar with your security on your device. And so users need to have that awareness, and a colleague of mine, I'm stealing his quote, but he recently used this quote that, you know, security is not a toaster. You can't just sort of set it and forget it. And that you have to continually pay attention to it, just like you're paying attention to maintaining your car. And so that part of the awareness, I think, also needs to be there, that everyone's responsible as well for some part of security. Just like you lock your door when you leave, same thing.
And I think that's exactly the kind of mentality we need to educate users with. When people know how to secure their homes, they know to lock their doors. Have we taught them how to lock their computer? It shouldn't be complicated, but they ought to know, I need to turn the gate.
So I'll be a little contrarian. Today in 2011, we need to teach that, but tomorrow in 2012, the license is in force. So for example, if this thing is more than an arm's reach away from you, should work. If I gave it to Charlie, it would need to come on. Now, we don't have the technology for everything, but why can't we aim for that? And so that the burden of trying to keep the devices and stuff secure becomes less of a user thing and becomes built in. It's what Howard and many others talk about building security. That's the kind of visionary thing that unfortunately I don't see a lot of discussion around this town as to how do we shoot for something that today is impossible, but it's a dream we want. It may take us 10, 15 years to get there, but that's what we want. A lot of people draw analogies to car safety, for example. Cars are definitely a lot safer than they were many years ago, decades back, but there's still a responsibility to drive the car safely. There's still a responsibility to use the safety equipment. But you don't have to think about it as much anymore. Your brakes tend to have safety systems built in here. The computer in your car tells you when you need to change your oil. You don't have to go do the dipstick thing and keep checking. So that type of building safety is what we need to do in terms of building security, and but never get to the point where we think that now it's completely secure. Of course, remember I was talking about earlier, as we make the devices more secure, the brain is attached to that. This is an unfortunate human phenomenon. We just go off the rails for a second. We're the result of hundreds of thousands of years of evolution. So these things are how old? I mean, in terms of technical evolution, so they're very, very young for their age. We are much more afraid of a shark than we are of one of these. But what's the odds of getting eaten by a shark? I mean, statistically, right? We're talking one in trillions or something. But the odds of doing damage, perhaps even physical damage to yourself through electronics is much, much higher. But we don't see this as a shark. And that's a result of human evolution. We see something with teeth and hair and we freak out. So I'm not saying that we need to make computers look more scary so people back away from them. But we need to start thinking in terms of how do we change our social aspect, how do we rethink what these things are that we created, and do we need to be a little more adaptive in our behavior, or at least make the devices, if you start doing those safe things, have the device tell you you're doing something that's safe, so you get that rush of adrenaline, that oh my goodness, I've done something wrong kind of feedback from the device. That's where we need to go. That's the vision that we have.
Thank you. And Marcus, your comment's a good lead into what I'd like to ask the panel to comment on. For those you here who don't know me or on the webcast, I'm Guy Copeland with CSC, and I'm one of the co-chairs of the Cross-Sector Cybersecurity Working Group, which is a joint government and private sector, all critical infrastructures, cyber-focused working group. Your comment on evolving technology and the potential if we're innovative enough and visionary enough for getting some improvement through that process makes me think a little bit of what I see as some of the pent-up frustrations, especially from our government colleagues, and the perception that many of us have that the voluntary approach, which this month focuses on, voluntary improvements in awareness, but the voluntary approach that's embodied in the partnership between the public and private sector, there's perception that some of the dedication to that is falling off, especially on the government side, and that there is growing pressure for regulatory and legislative approaches, telling us how to do things. And I personally am very concerned about the impact that might have on our commitment to the continuing improvements, the impact it might have on future innovation, potentially delaying it. But I would be interested in the views of the panel as well, too, in that area. Are you seeing that same perception as well, too? And what do you think the implications might be for the partnership and for the awareness program in particular? Thank you.
I'll defer to Cheri.
Yes, I agree with you.
We're all on the same views.
Not surprising. I think your remarks around the regulatory nature that we're beginning to see the partnership, those in government continue to try to push the partnership towards, is certainly concerning. And I strongly agree with your remarks that this will somehow take innovation in raising awareness and security technology and securing our critical question I ask a lot lately is what demonstrable outcome is some of the current legislative proposals that are on the table, what demonstrable outcome are they trying to achieve? And I'm not sure I've been able to answer that yet.
That kind of boils down to what is the specific problem we're trying to solve? I've had that conversation with many people in both industry and government. We can't just say cyberspace is insecure. That's like saying, well, the atmosphere has hurricanes. Great observation. But what are we going to do about it? What is the exact problem? So Ari was in here earlier. They have zeroed in on one of the problems, botnets. They build bifurcated multiple pieces. But that's a specific problem. That's great. Let's work on that. Identity management, a very specific problem. When we start going at, instead of just this big, large cyberspaces and secure, and start picking out individual problems, the partnership is real strong here because industry has ideas and solutions, government has needs, they also got policy ideas, and there's a lot we can do together. If the conversation stays real high and strategic, and we just want to secure cyberspace because we're afraid some cyber monster is living under our cyber bed is going to reach out and grab us again, then we have irrational conversations. We don't partner anymore. We all retreat to our corners because we lack common language of what is it we're trying to solve. So we see a lot of this in Washington. We have groups that want to stay super high and fearful. We have groups that really are willing to dig into an issue as hard as it might be and begin to work towards solutions. I prefer that alternative as an outcome. But being realistic, there's a lot of fear in this town that something bad is going to happen. And it's going to happen tonight or tomorrow or next week. And there will be egg on the face of all those who fail to do something to prevent it. And so there's a strong urge here in this town to not be the one standing there with egg on one's face for having done nothing. And I would argue that none of us would ever bear that burden, even if we had the most catastrophic attack that's out there. These things are unpredictable. They come from the craziest places, and trying to pin blame on somebody is wrong. And even to try and accept blame in a situation we can't be done. That's an attitude problem we have here in Washington. It's creating a lot of fear of the unknown. So the more we can do as industry and as government working together to identify specific problems to work on, the easier it will be to kind of soften things down a bit and not be so afraid of that cyber monster that's in your head that's trying to reach out and grab you, which maybe never happened. That's also another possible outcome.
And I think that there's a misperception amongst many that somehow you can buy risk down to zero.
Right.
And it may sound cliche, but we're really talking about risk mitigation, not about risk elimination. And that is a recognition, I think, that we need to do collectively from an industry standpoint to drive home that message to those that are trying to do something. And I think we would all agree something needs to be done. But what that is, we need to work together to determine what it is.
So let me take this down a little bit further. Then we're big companies, we're major corporations, we live and breathe in Washington, D.C., and so we're inundated with, great news radio stations and Ask the CIO, and we're involved in that. But I will say that when you get outside the perimeter of the Beltway, you're less likely to have companies, corporations, individuals understand what really the impact could be with legislation and regulation. And so you have representatives from each one of the states at multiple levels pleading a case on the Hill when in fact the constituents back home have no understanding of what it is that's happening on the Hill. And so there is another component to cybersecurity awareness, and that is government's involvement or non-involvement and how it impacts our citizens today and tomorrow as we start to look at adoptions of technology and adoptions of regulations across the globe. What does that do for War Treaties Act? What does it do for international policy that could potentially impact me as a citizen traveling to those countries? And I'm carrying my BlackBerry. Do I know that there could be a problem? Do I know that my technology could be taken and a country could actually confiscate my device? So are we really looking at who we're trying to protect? And that's our citizens. And So we have a tendency to stay very policy focused and big company focused, when in fact the lowest common denominator are our employees that don't necessarily live within the Beltway or aren't necessarily technologists. And so helping to transpose that under this theme of shared responsibility is to help our employees understand and our citizens understand how they fit into this. So I take a little bit of a different view on it, having participated in some of the sector groups as well. But I really think as I get more out into the Unisys, who our customers are, I really see that there's an opportunity for us to share information at multiple levels, not just to think about what's happening within the Beltway.
And I would just add to that, is one of the areas that we're heavily focused on at Symantec is the small and medium-sized businesses. You know, that is a whole segment of the business world that really doesn't have the kind of awareness that we in large enterprises have. 27 million, there are more than 27 million small and medium-sized businesses in the U.S. today. 99.9% of those represent companies of 500 employees or less. So think about that. That's a huge segment that, just like you said, Patty, that needs the kind of awareness and outreach that those of us in enterprise have had 10, 15, 20 years ago.
We take it for granted too.
Yeah,
Sure,
we do.
yes.
Absolutely.
A question in the back?
Mary Ellen, I've been in security and government and industry. I think there's another angle that we're not thinking about is the state and local. If you look at the privacy, which is a federal law, many state and local governments have created their own laws, which makes it very confusing for everybody trying to do business. So on some of these issues that you were talking about, while I'm not a pro-regulatory person, something like identity management, if it's not managed at the highest level and sort of a global view, is going to create the same problem we have with the Privacy Act. So when you were discussing some of those concerns, have you thought about how to address that kind of thing, which is certainly ubiquitous when we ultimately get into it, protecting the social security numbers of your children and so forth. So it's a slightly different twist, I think.
Well, I'm not really sure of the answer to that, but I will certainly agree with you that it is a challenge for small businesses to be able to understand and navigate through the myriad of different state regulations and federal regulations. I'm not sure what the answer is, but you are right, it is a challenge for small businesses.
Part of what we work on, Verizon has obviously the same problem. We have 50 PUCs we have to work with. We've got local city, county, miles of regulations, so we have armies of lawyers that go out and it's very expensive, as you can imagine. We do ask here in Washington for the concept of federal preemption, so that if it's a law or a regulation or whatever that you're going to impose on us, then they can apply as far down as you can, so that you don't have variations of it. So you don't have federal law and 50 state laws and 50,000 county laws. Let's just make it the same, because as a large corporation, having to deal with all these different jurisdictions is very expensive. Much less if you're a small business with a couple of locations and trying to navigate those borders. Now that doesn't take away from the desired autonomy of state and local, which you certainly want. We do not run a huge federal system across the United States where laws are vanilla and the same everywhere. You want to have some of those differences. But cyberspace is somewhat unique, being a millisecond sector, as I call it, and the little ones and zeros certainly don't know if they're in Fairfax County 1 millisecond, Howard County the next millisecond. They don't care. So in these unique respects, we need to have some commonality in terms of public regulation, whereas there can certainly be regional or local differences for things that don't have to do with ones and zeros. Fully agree.
Are there any other questions in the audience? Well, if not, then I hope you all will join me in thanking our panelists for sharing their views today. I hope you'll also join me in thanking Charlie Krim and his team at Lockheed Martin. Being ever optimist that he is, he's already started talking about plans for next year for this event. So we thank him for that and his vision, and we hope you all will participate again. And again, it's not just a month. It's something we think about all the time. So here's to cybersecurity awareness. Thank you very much for joining us.
such a professional and talented panel together. I think any panel leader would love to have this panel here because they're well informed and they are very articulate about the issues at hand. So I want to thank the panel for joining us this morning. It clearly is Lockheed Martin's pleasure to host TechAmerica, the National Cybersecurity Alliance, here at our Global Vision Center to help kick off Cybersecurity Awareness Month. It's been a pleasure to do this, and we look for future partnering as we continue to push the Stop, Think, and Connect theme and improve the way we all handle cybersecurity. So thank you, and congratulations again to the panel and to the audience for being here.
Thanks, everyone. Have a nice weekend.
Stay safe online.
And stay safe online.
Stop thinking.